Hello, podcast listeners. This is your host with the most. If you're looking for a podcast that is about decor in your house, this is not the one. But in fact, in this episode, we're going to talk about celebrity encounters. I recently had a Howie Mandel encounter that, well, you'll hear all about it. We're going to talk about hand signs when you're on a boat and a look at Sylvester Stallone's career. This might be the most what am I listening to episode of JJ Meets World ever. Sit back, relax, enjoy. And by the way, if you'd like to help support our podcast, visit jjmeetsworld.com where you can donate to our Patreon, pick up some killer swag at our merch shop, or click the link to Apple Podcasts and give us a 5-star review.
1, 2, 3, 4. J.J. Gordon, sort of like that Indiana Jones, in that he's always sniffing out his next adventure. Yes, he is. He's always interviewing guests so he can have them on his show and they can talk about pop culture, arts, and leisure. J.J. has his flag unfurled and he likes his french fries curled, and he's fun and then he twirls as he goes to meet the world. He will march into the rain even if his ankle sprain. Take a peek inside his brain. This podcast is called JJ Meets World.
That means I am not ready. What are we starting for?
Okay, you gave me a thumbs up. That means you're not ready. Not ready.
Not ready. I am not in position because I'm standing.
Okay.
This would be I'm sitting in my chair and I'm ready to go.
So thumbs down means that you're, I mean, it sort of like says like, I'm ready.
Yeah. So I'm still here though.
Okay. Did you ever?
I'm still here. Hold on.
Yep. Okay, you're still at thumbs up. Well, but
hold on. I'm still here. I'm still here.
But you can still talk to me. Okay.
Hold on.
Okay.
Okay, I'm ready.
Okay. I'm glad we got to that point. Did you ever do any water skiing or tubing behind boats or anything like that?
No, I had so much. I still probably would if I even considered it a thought again. But I had so much anxiety about that as a kid.
Really?
I was super anxious about going out into the water. I would go out, like I'd go out on a boat and stuff, go fishing. I would never swim outside of the 3-foot boundary of like the shore where it's shallow. No, I never even thought it looked fun. I just thought it looked scary, so I never did it. I used to have a recurring anxiety nightmare when I was a kid about being at my lake cabin and standing on the dock, kind of looking up at the cabin and sort of walking backwards and not paying attention to where I was going. And I would always fall backwards into a waiting speedboat that would then just take off into the middle of the lake. And I would be like, I'm now trapped on this boat that I don't know how to control, and it's driving me away from home over this lake. And I would have that recurring dream. So no, I've never water skied. I've never done anything like that.
I am a really good skier. Like that was something that as a kid I got into. I really enjoyed it. I will admit I haven't done it in a few years, but I think it's all muscle memory, and I'm stronger now than I was as a kid. So maybe like I'd be even better, but I could do down to one ski. Like I could drop a ski and go slalom. In my family, and I'm talking about my extended family, so my cousins all spoke this special language, and some people had similar things, but not exactly the same. And so the hand signals that you would use. So, for example, if you were on the tube and you wanted a thrill ride, you would give a thumbs up, which meant faster, faster, faster. Thumbs down meant slower, slower, slower. If you put your hand out, palm facing you, that meant stop. What do you think tapping your head meant? Because that was one of our...
That was an actual thing?
Yeah, what do you think tapping your head meant?
I'm doing a good job.
Nope. That meant home. Home. Like you're ready to go home. Now,
so that's got to be how we signal to each other. At some point, we're going to get interviews on the show again. And if one of us thinks this interview's going too long and I want to get out of here, we just got to do this.
Tap your head.
Want to go home.
It's interesting because a lot of radio uses hand signals. Baseball and radio use hand signals because if you're interviewing somebody and you want this to be turned into a promo or like it's time to wrap it up. So like, for example, holding an imaginary stick and breaking it means that you need to go to a break. If you do a little swirly with your finger, that means wrap it up. Joel's got this cool thing where he like takes 2 fingers and taps his forearm, and that means it would be a good promo. And so everyone's got their own special things. And like, if they put 2 fists up to you, that means that there's like a minute left. a little C with your hand means 30 seconds. And then, of course, like the countdown with 10 on your fingers, which I always thought, I guess I've never asked this when I'm hiring, but I'm like, may I see both of your hands to make sure that they've got 10 fingers?
Let me just throw this at you right now. That needs to be you guys' next video promo, is just seeing the different people talking to each other in the different hand signals.
Yeah.
Right. I think that would be a great...
While programming is going on, like,
that would be an
behind them.
amazing montage. So just free idea for KFGO.
I'll take that one.
Yeah, you guys
That's
guys should make that video promo where it's just, the different... You can even make stuff up if you don't have enough. But to showcase all your DJ talent and, I don't know, your microphones. I don't know. What else do you guys show?
Like when we're doing like a video promo.
Yeah, it's just a person talking like what we're doing.
I mean, most of the time, like we wait until we have a guest in the studio that's sort of noteworthy, so like the governor of the state or, I don't know. In fact, this is a good segue because I wanted to talk about how disappointed I am in Howie Mandel.
Yeah.
So
at first I thought you meant immediately, springing Billy Corgan on Bill Burr like that was not very cool.
You know what? Okay, so I haven't listened to that, but everyone has brought it up to me, including Howie Mandel.
I didn't actually watch it, but I know it happened.
But you know that on Howie Mandel's podcast, he was interviewing Bill Burr, and then he brought on Billy Corgan, and then tried to pretend like they were brothers.
That was the joke. He was trying to do a gag. And I guess Bill Burr decided he didn't want to play along.
Oh, that's interesting. Because Howie Mandel also did not want to play along. So here's what happened when I interviewed Howie Mandel. So he's coming to town and they want to sell some more tickets. And they're like, hey, would you like to interview? And I'm like, absolutely, I would. Because not only was Bobby's World a show that I loved as a kid, but he was the voice of Gizmo and Gremlins, the movie Little Monsters, also co-starring Fred Savage. I watched religiously. In fact, I downloaded a song called The Sound of Breaking Glass because I loved it so much in a montage that they had. It was a real, like, privilege for me to get to interview. And I've had a chance to interview some really interesting people who've had like an impact on who I am. And I thought this one was going to be another one.
And is this just over like a phone?
It's over phone. Yeah. So I had made arrangements with this tour manager and we were, they didn't say you're only going to get 5 minutes or anything like that. And usually that's what they say is you've got 5 minutes, Howie will call into your studio line and that's how you'll do it. And we chose to not go live, but to record it in advance. So I had all my research here, and I know that they want to promote the show. So I will gladly promote the show. But I also think that people want to hear something about Deal or No Deal or America's Got Talent. They want to hear some anecdotes about, working with Frank Welker, the king of voices and stuff like that. And so I start off the interview literally like this, be like, on the line with us, we have Howie Mandel, a guy who had a huge influence on who I am today because the creativity of Bobby's World, if you want to listen to the best audio commentary ever, what he did with Joe Dante and Gremlins is amazing, Little Monsters, and then I listed like 4 other things that he, Muppet Babies, he's the voice of Skeeter in Muppet Babies, and I was like, ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Howie Mandel, he's like, yep, I did all that stuff, but my favorite thing is, and we're like, what? And he goes, stand-up comedy. I love stand-up. It's where I grew up. It's where I came from. But listen, I was late for this interview, and do you want to know why? I'm just so handsome. And then, I kid you not, Tucker, the next 8 minutes is him describing how handsome he is.
Huh.
So much so that when we played this back on air, someone texted in within the first 2 minutes. It goes, it sounds like Trump's son.
Weird.
Yeah, and it was like we went along with the gag of how like attractive he is, right? And so Amy was saying like, oh, is it hard for you to be this attractive? Like you're in a big arena, and he's like, oh no, like even if you're in the back row, you'll be able to tell how handsome I am and how good looking, and I got smoldering, and I'm like, I can tell that this is sort of a bit he's trying to do.
Sure, he's committing to let's do it. Let's talk in this playground of banter,
but it's not, it's coming off as just, and not even being like weird, like, oh, this is interesting. It's coming off as you are actively avoiding any question that we have by doing this. Because I had said, like, hey, you know, you love doing stand-up. You're going to be at the Shields Arena, which isn't quite as intimate as, you know, like a comedy club that only seats 45. So how do you adjust when you do that? And he goes, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter where you're sitting. Like, you'll be able to see me, and like, you'll be like, oh my gosh, that guy's good looking. And he just kept going back to it. And he wasn't saying it like in a fun voice either. He was saying it in this kind of like monotone voice. And at one point, Amy gave me the holding the invisible stick, breaking it in half, and I nodded yes. And so we wrap up the interview, and she and I are kind of silent for a second, and finally she's like, he was kind of a jerk. And I was like, yeah, he was a jerk. And it made me think of I've interviewed a lot of jerks, right? A lot of people who maybe they don't have respect for this market. Maybe they don't have respect for people trying to help promote their shows, whatever it is. But I've also interviewed people who are amazing. So, for example, the comedian who I will defend this until my grave, Louis Anderson, was a gentleman among gentlemen. He was, and it's not that he just gave us time, but he wanted to talk to us before the interview started and get to know us a little bit and talk about, you know, things like this. And, you know, I said, well, listen, I just, you know, read your book, My Mother. And he's like, oh, yeah. And so he talked to us about that. And he goes like, you know, just we can start recording whenever you're ready. We had him on the phone for like half an hour, and it felt like he was genuine. And he was, you know, he was saying our names back to us. And so you felt like you were talking to someone who, sure, you know, we wanted to get the date out that he was going to be at the Dakota Magic Casino. But really, he was having fun talking to people who were appreciating his art form, right?
Yeah.
Another one is 80s songstress Tiffany. I interviewed her, and it's funny because I had just started on KFGO, a talk show format, right? And so when I was interviewing Tiffany, I wasn't even officially on the show yet. It was still It Takes Two with Jack and Amy, and then a third wheel JJ. So I'm on this program, and I was like, guys, I will take the reins on this one. I got this one handled.
You feel like someone's cousin who had to bring them along on their date?
Yes, 100%. I'd be like, I'm wearing a coat that's too big for me. But Tiffany told me in the interview that I was the first person who ever talked about her being the voice of Judy Jetson in the Jetsons movie and her Playboy spread in the same interview. And I was like, I want to know everything about it. And I said, you know, like, gosh, you know, you had a spot on a Saved by the Bell. Before Saved by the Bell was Saved by the Bell, it was Good Morning Miss Bliss. Are you aware of this?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
So she was on Good Morning Miss Bliss, and we, you know, talked about that. And, you know, I said, so do you have to play I Think We're Alone Now? She's like, yeah, you know, you got to give the fans what they want. That's, you know, that was one of my huge hits, so I'm always going to play that in a show. And I was like, oh, this is kind of interesting, fascinating. And she was just a real sweetheart, very nice, great with her time. But then you get a Howie Mandel, and I'm just like, and I was talking to someone about it yesterday, and I said, listen, I would hate if my day was like, hey, listen, for the next 2 hours, you got to get on the phone, you got to tell the same anecdotes. We're promoting shows in Tallahassee, Greensboro, you know, Omaha, and Fargo. That would be a nightmare, just to have to regurgitate the same stuff over and over. It's for the same reason why, have you ever seen clips of what it looks like at a press junket for a film?
Yeah.
Where it is like mind numbing, right? It's 2 days of you sitting on, you know, uncomfortable chairs, telling the same jokes and stories over and over and over again.
And I'm really curious about how effective that whole system is, even.
Right.
I really don't know. I don't have a good sense of it, but I do see, like you're saying, this is how it's just evolved into this circus, and does really blasting out basically the same little anecdotes and stale interviews that are devoid of content and have such a shelf life, like at the same time, that sort of spray and pray, just cover yourself everywhere. I wonder how valuable that is. I'm sure sometimes it is. You've got like the Ryan Reynoldses who have like a savviness on how to make the most out of those scenarios. But yeah, most of these actors, they just want to show up and say their lines.
Right. I also think to some extent, a lot of journalists will try and be like, I'm going to be the one who like is their favorite, right? I'm going to ask them something that they don't know. I'm going to go with a super deep cut, but like their PR people are like, you need to talk about the Lion King Mufasa.
Yeah. There's obviously any kind of a grind that you have to do can be drudgery, but I would suggest to Howie Mandel, maybe put it in a little more context, right? If I'm at my job throughout the week, I'm editing some bank video and I'm like, oh, this is so boring. It's a grind. But you know what's also a grind? Pouring cement.
Yep.
Shoveling, working the burger grill at a greasy spoon, fucking wiping a senior citizen's ass, right, at a hospital. Like, those are grinds too.
And I will tell you the difference. Those grinds don't pay you $10 million a year.
No.
Right. And this is a point that was brought up by somebody when they were like, hey, I heard that Howie Mandel interview. What was going on? And they said, he is paid and compensated to do this. Like he's a performer and an entertainer, and he was supposed to be putting on a show. They said, like, I listened to that interview and we decided not to go to the show. Yeah. And I'm like, yeah. And I'm not looking for validation that like, oh, you did everything you could. And that's not what it is. I am just saying, like, you should have just declined the interview. You should have just said no.
I can understand, hey, this is boring. I do like 50 of these in a day. Okay. Well, there's got to be ways to make it fun that doesn't require you just torpedoing the whole thing and just being lame.
So the next person I interviewed after that is this guy who travels to states, and he goes to every single town in the state. And he does like a history of like, hey, where does this town get its name? What its population is, takes photos of like interesting landmarks. And so he's done Nebraska, he's done Iowa, I think maybe South Dakota, but he just did North Dakota. And it's like a 500-page book. Wow. It's huge. And we had him on, and he was ready to go when I said, like, well, did you find anything surprising? And he's like, oh, of course, and this and this and these things. I'm like, okay.
Yep.
Okay. There you go. This is someone who understood the assignment. And you know what? I guarantee you he sold 100 books during that show of people who were like, oh, he talked about Hunter. I've got my grandparents used to live in Hunter. I'd love to own this book. And so I just think, know the assignment, right? And you've had a chance to interact with people of celebrity status over the years, and you've had great interactions and some that were disappointing as well.
Yep.
And I think when it comes down to it, and I'm not saying that I am Howie Mandel status. I want to precursor this conversation with that, but every time someone comes up to me and wants to talk to me about how much they enjoy my show, I make sure to do two things. Number one is I thank them for listening, and I'm so appreciative of it. Number two, I always ask them what their name is. Right? Like that's my go-to, because I think like that forms a connection between us now. And like, it's one thing to just be like, hey, I really like your show, JJ, and be like, hey, thank you so much. You have a great night now. But when I'm like, thank you so much, I really appreciate that. What's your name? Carol. Carol, thank you so much for listening. Like, where do you listen most of the time? Are you in the car? Or and like, no, I listen. I've got an old radio. Oh, that's really cool. Is your grandparents' radio? And so if you can form that connection, and you know what it costs me? Nothing.
Right.
Cost me an extra 2 minutes of my life. And you know what? If that person turns around and tells their like really attractive granddaughter, they're like, I know he's married now, but if there was ever an opportunity, I'd really like you to see if you could, if you could couple up with that JJ Gordon. Like, and it's also not disingenuous too. I am genuinely interested in knowing the people who listen, and I make notes in my phone all the time. Like if I get a listener who comes up over the weekend and goes, I listen every day during the lunch hour, I wouldn't miss your show, blah, blah. I will make sure on Monday to be like, hey, Ruthie, good to meet you at the grocery store this weekend. Hope that chicken pot pie was good. And, to go to, oh, brother, where art thou? Like, hey, Pappy, ain't you going to do a little politicking? We ain't one at a time in here. We're mass communicating. Sometimes you do have to go one at a time in
That's
here.
That's a great line.
That movie is so good. If you've never seen Oh, Brother, Where Art Thou? Because it's the Odyssey. It's a southern version of the Greek poem, the Odyssey. And it's so good. And like, It's perfectly cast. Hey, Pappy, ain't you gonna do a little politicking?
Well, and that song gripped the country.
It did.
Gripped for like a decade. It was being played in high schools. You know, everyone wanted to learn how to do that song, and that song probably got a whole generation of like kids interested in playing music in school.
Yeah,
that's where I heard it all the time.
That kind of like that southern folk music,
bluegrass.
bluesy.
Bluegrass was obviously already like a staple of Americana, but it felt, at least to me, someone living in Fargo, North Dakota, where that music isn't native to, that there was a new explosion of interest based off of that movie.
The soundtrack as a whole is amazing because there's a bunch of like spirituals in there too, and you know, when they go and they meet the sirens, the three women who are doing laundry in the river, and like, go to sleep, little baby.
It's also one of those movies where a leading actor really does redefine themselves in their career, right? Like George Clooney's career leading up to that movie, he would not have been an obvious casting choice for that role. What an inspired choice.
Yeah.
Because, and what he was able to do and show in that, I think really opened up the rest of his career. I mean, he already had an amazing career, right? It's not like, oh, he really made it then, but he reinvigorated it to a level that kind of made it.
He was more than just the pretty face in an action movie. Right. Because I mean, his career could have gone the way that like a Sylvester Stallone had for a long time, where they're like, nope, this is just where you fit. And he turns around and he's so funny in that movie. He is so funny in that movie. In fact, almost every performance in that movie is absolutely perfect.
You know what's a good Sylvester Stallone movie? Copland.
Really?
Really. I mean, it's, first of all, there's a lot of Sopranos alumni in Copland. But
David Preval, there's another celebrity that I interacted with who was amazing.
He was cool.
David Preval was amazing.
It was very cool. But yeah, definitely give if you haven't seen it before, give it a watch.
I'm pretty sure I have seen
Harvey
it.
Keitel, Ray Liotta, the guy who played the bad guy in Terminator 2, the T-1000 or whatever it was, who's obviously in The Sopranos as well. You see Artie Bucco in the background of a lot of shots as just like an extra. But a lot of Robert De Niro. Robert De Niro's in the film, and Stallone plays a completely against his type character, who's very demure and sheepish and a pushover and is just being bullied the whole time. There are some amazing scenes of acting in that movie.
I feel like Copland and the movie Daylight came out maybe within like a short window of each other. And have you ever seen Daylight?
Who is that? Stallone?
Stallone.
Okay.
Where they get trapped in the Lincoln Tunnel underneath like going between New York and New Jersey, and they got to escape it, and they got to stop the criminals.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. That was another one.
I really like his career.
Stallone's?
Yeah, I really do, because like everything
give
from
me some highlights. Like
Rocky
tell me
to King Shark, right?
Yeah.
Like I mean, obviously to me those are kind of two things. He would definitely play. He would make fun of himself, or he would do like, wasn't he in a Robert Rodriguez Spy Kids movie like as the bad guy?
He was. In fact, like he plays like 5 characters,
right?
And he's good in that too.
And then obviously he's one of the defining faces of like 80s muscle action, explosion,
over the top, a movie that made me want to get into arm wrestling.
Right. But I mean, his work is so important to the history of American cinema that Philadelphia actually has a statue of that character.
Do you know who gave them that statue? He did.
He did. Really?
Yeah. In fact, I
did not know that.
There's a great story about how they put this like the Rocky statue, because they put it at the top of the steps where like Rocky's famous like steps and stuff like that. And I guess there was a problem with like he was mad because he showed up one day and it was covered like in pigeon crap. And so they moved it somewhere else. Like it'd be great, but yeah.
Speaking of Bill Burr, did you ever see that famous incident where he was he was doing like a comedy tour with a bunch of comedians, and they were doing a stop in Philadelphia, and the Philly crowd was just booing everyone and like being really obnoxious? This is all on YouTube. Bill Burr goes on stage and just does a 30-minute takedown of the whole crowd in the city of Philadelphia.
Really?
One of the things he says is like, you guys are like so fucking lame. You have a statue of a fake athlete. Right? And it's like this really famous to like comedians moment where Bill Burr just went out and did a hilarious set, like actually won over the crowd in a lot of ways by telling them how big pieces of shit they were.
Yeah, sometimes people like that. Okay, I want to go through this real quick just because I think it would be good. But so Stallone is active. I mean, he starts in the late 60s.
He had softcore porn on his record, right?
He does. He was a beefcake.
Hey, I think props to him.
Yep.
Let's not sex shame here, JJ.
In 1970, he has an uncredited role in the movie MASH, which I think is pretty big, right? So
is he visible on camera?
Soldier sitting at camp table.
Okay,
so
you probably see his shoulder or something.
So his breakout role is Rocky in 1976, to which he writes it,
which is a crazy story. There's so many. I really do love Rocky.
Me too.
The whole, not just the movie, but the whole story around the making of it.
And to be quite honest, I think I like almost all the Rocky movies. I definitely like the Creed movies.
I have not seen the Creed movies yet, but
they're good.
I do need to.
So he becomes a leading man.
I love the Rambo movies.
Yeah, me too.
Sorry.
He does Rocky in 76. He does Rocky 2 in 79. And then he starts doing stuff like Nighthawks, which is great. Rocky 3. Then First Blood. Okay.
Ooh, First Blood is so good.
Have you ever seen Rhinestone?
No.
Rhinestone is, I'm going to tell you the premise. A country music star must turn an obnoxious New York cabbie into a singer in order to win a bet. It stars Sylvester Stallone and Dolly Parton.
I've got another movie of his that I'm excited for when it comes up here.
Okay.
In the 90s, early 90s.
Rambo, Rocky 4 comes out in 85, and so by 85, he's kind of in this point of where like he needs to reinvent himself a little bit, right?
Schwarzenegger's kind of in a similar space.
Yes, very much so. And Schwarzenegger ends up going the like family comedy route. And I think at one point Stallone starts to do that.
He definitely starts to do that.
So Cobra, that's another good one. Over the Top.
The pizza cutting scene.
Oh,
whole movie is worth just that scene.
Just that. Rambo 3 comes out in 88. Lockup, Tango and Cash. That would be, I think, his first big foray into a comedy. And it's one of those movies that, when it comes out, it's big enough a hit because, I mean, you've got Kurt Russell, you've got Sylvester Stallone, but it doesn't solidify him. So, and then in 90, he does Rocky 5. Then he does Oscar. Mm-hmm. Are you familiar with Oscar?
Yep.
Right? Which should be great. That movie is packed and stacked with a cast that is...
It's wild.
I mean, there's multiple Oscar winners in it. And if you've never seen it, it all takes place in one day, which is my sister's favorite genre of film. And it is about a wise guy, a mafia kingpin who decides he's going to go straight. And so it's his first day not being a criminal and all the things that go wrong in this day at his mansion. It really is fantastic. That's 1991. By the way, Oscar turns out to be a flop, big flop. 1992. Stop
there we
or
go.
My mom will shoot.
Yep.
What could be better than a Golden Girl?
Yep.
And Sylvester Stallone.
The memory that movie always unlocks for me is Videoland in the early 90s. Not when it was in the strip mall that had Cost Cutter's haircut and it's some other stuff now. But once it had moved over to the last building it had, it's standalone before history happened. Rudy was using a poster of Stop or My Mom Will Shoot at the entrance of the 18 plus section. And so that's where I first came into contact with the movie, was just seeing this, because it was at like kids' eye level, right? So kid walks in, the first thing you see is Stop or My Mom Will Shoot 18 plus. And you're like, what's that?
Yeah, oh boy.
What is this?
Isn't that one of the Golden Girls?
What does that mean? Right?
Have you ever seen that movie? Have you ever actually watched it?
No, I haven't.
Oh, it's surprising. Like, it's not a horrible premise. Like, and it's a really fun, like, mother-son story. And
it's the youngest actress from the Golden Girls, right?
No, it's Sophia. And she,
I thought that
but she
actress-
was the youngest.
That's what I'm saying, the youngest actress.
I
because
believe you're
she played
correct.
the oldest character.
Yeah,
but was the youngest of them all.
So then 1993, I would wager to say, is one of the best years in Stallone's career because Cliffhanger becomes such an enormous hit. And then he follows that up that same year with Demolition Man.
I named a cockatiel after Cliffhanger.
Did you really?
I did. Yep. We had a brief period where I had cockatiels at my dad's house, and I named one who was always climbing on the side like a bird does. I was like, well, he looks just like Cliffhanger because the trailer was out. So that's my tie to Cliffhangers.
Did you named it Cliffhanger?
I named the cockatiel Cliffhanger.
Okay, not his like even character name. You didn't name him Gabe
I never
Walker?
saw the movie. I saw the trailer on TV as a kid and went, "Oh, he's crawling along the side of a mountain just like this bird."
Do you know who the villain is in Cliffhanger?
I would assume the mountain.
No, because
cliff.
he's
The
already
cliff that he's hanging
No,
off
he's already mastered those things,
Okay.
and it's a human element that makes the cliff hanging so precarious. It's John Lithgow.
No shit.
Yeah, he's good in it. And then Demolition Man is one of my favorite movies of all time.
Is John Lithgow bad in anything?
He's bad in Cliffhanger.
Oh, you said he was good in it. You just said he was good in it.
He's really good as the actor in it, but I said he's the villain.
Yeah,
I said, do you know who the villain is in?
I'm saying,
are you saying?
Does he do a bad job at anything?
I see.
Who's on first? What's on second?
Has he been disappointing as an actor?
Did he do
in
a
anything?
bad job acting in anything?
No, because even in Harry and the Hendersons, I start to cry when he has to slap Harry and get him to run away. Oh my God. He plays himself in an episode of 30 Rock that's really good. Yeah. So then he does The Specialist. He does Judge Dredd. And then he does a movie that
Judge Dredd.
Yeah. Now, that was one that, like, if it had come out 10 years later, they would have done a better job because this was very much...
Opening 5 minutes of that movie?
Great.
Fucking awesome.
Great.
Like, fantastic.
Totally understood the assignment, and then it starts to devolve.
And hilarious. Like, really, really funny. Over the top.
In 1995, and in 95, he does Judge Dredd, and then he does Assassins. Have you ever seen Assassins?
No.
So, Antonio Banderas, here's the thing. As an idea for a movie, it's great, but I feel like I've also seen it. Sylvester Stallone is considered to be one of the top assassins in the world. And an up-and-coming guy wants to unseat him so that he can get that role. Well, you find out that Sylvester Stallone killed his mentor so that he could become the best assassin in the world. And they're back and forth. It also has some great technology stuff from like 1995 where he's like in this chat room and like, it's wonderful. And then
is there a titular line for that movie where someone goes... There's about
600 titular lines in that movie. And then I watched it because every New Year, Jill and I pick an actor and actress and we try and work our way through their filmography. And we watch a bunch of them on New Year's Eve and New Year's Day. And Julianne Moore is in it. And her character's name is Electra. Just let that sink in. So 96 is when Daylight comes out. 97 is Copland. So he does those like back to back.
So I'm in the 7th grade at this point.
Then he does the movie Ants, which is two competing computer-generated movies about ants that come out the same year.
The golden age of computer animated stuff was just suddenly Toy Story had happened and our minds were all blown. We'd seen 3D animation before, but not at this level.
No, certainly not.
No. It's when you saw them when we saw Toy Story.
That's blew my mind.
It's one of those moments where you go, this is an instant classic.
Yeah.
It's already one.
I imagine it was the same thing as like if someone saw Snow White when it first was released and saying like the game has changed.
Yeah, because Pixar was still under the Disney banner at that point. No? Yes?
No, it was independent. It was independent.
When
Disney
Toy
was
Story
their
came
distributor.
out. Oh, that's what it was.
That's all it was. They were the distributor.
Because with it, like Disney had Lion King, which was an instant classic, and then Toy Story, under the Disney banner was an instant classic.
It's big, and then A Bug's Life was their follow-up to Toy Story, came out the same year as Ants. There's a weird thing in Hollywood where they will do, The Thin Red Line and Saving Private Ryan, Volcano and Dante's Peak, and like they just seem to all enjoy these similar movies at the same time. Okay, so then unfortunately his career slumps in the early 2000s because he does Get Carter, Driven, Detox, Avenging Angela, which I never even saw. Shade. He does Spy Kids 3 in 2023 as the toy maker. Then in 2006, he does Rocky Balboa. He tries to bring the Rocky character back. And do you know the premise of Rocky Balboa?
It's been forever since I've seen it. He returns to fight, right? 'Cause
he does.
A young guy who's like the top of his game is like calling him out, right?
Well, so they've got this like a Korean animated thing where they said like, hey, the greatest boxers of all time, who, you know, if this shape up, and they said Rocky versus this new guy, and they said Rocky would win based on like style and everything like that. And so then this guy challenges him to get into it.
Because it's out in the press, right? It's a narrative on sports talk.
In 2008, he gets a return to Rambo, and that 2008 Rambo I enjoyed.
That was fun.
It's not until this next Rambo that I go, you need to retire this character.
I haven't seen the one after that.
I saw it with your dad. Then he gets,
He's such a guy.
oh God, then he
down.
gets into the Expendables, and that is a great moment in his career where he decides, listen, I am
savvy.
It is like, I'm gonna get all these other guys that these people who watched these movies on VHS as a kid now can go to it and have expendable income to watch the Expendables. He does something called Bullet to the Head. Then he's got Escape Plan, which I heard good things, but I never really watched. Grudge Match, the boxing movie, Expendables 3. Then he gets into Creed, which is the first Creed, really, really good. And then I think we were all surprised that he ends up in Guardians of the Galaxy 2.
Yeah.
And we really liked him being there.
Yep.
A lot.
Yep.
Right?
Yep. Loved it.
Escape Plan 2, Hades. Creed 2. He's in the video game Mortal Kombat as John Rambo. Escape Plan, The Extractors. So the Escape Plan film series has 3 in the course of only 5 years. So they are knocking those things out. Then, of course, Suicide Squad is King Shark. Great. Guardians of the Galaxy, Expendables 4, Armor, Tulsa King, Alarum. You know what they don't include in this? And even though like he's technically not acting in it, he's only in a cardboard cutout in it. But in The Last Action Hero, when the kid is in the realm, do you know The Last Action Hero?
Yeah.
So he's been sucked into the movie and he's trying to explain to Arnold Schwarzenegger that he's Arnold Schwarzenegger, not this. And they walk into a Blockbuster and he shows him a big standee for Terminator 2, and it's not Arnold on the motorcycle, it's Sylvester Stallone, and Arnold does something like, I heard he's really good in this. Yeah. Sylvester Stallone. I bet you he'd be a nice guy to interview. I bet you he's been doing this for so long that he's just a fun guy to talk to.
I've seen select scenes from Tulsa King.
So have I.
And they seem fun.
I've seen
like an interesting show.
Because he's like a gangster, and I saw one where they're trying to explain cryptocurrency to him, and he's like, I don't understand that. Like, I run numbers and girls, and that's what I do. And I was like, you know what? There probably is this aging gangster out there who doesn't understand the modern world of gangstering, right?
Right.
So yeah, so there's some interesting stuff there. And Tucker, I don't know if you understand what this hand sign means.
No, you've shown me that plenty of times. And
it means that this episode of JJ Meets World is coming to a conclusion. I appreciate the fact that one of the things you did is when I showed you the hand sign, you focused solely on that and you didn't make eye contact with me. You were 100% focused, and I appreciate that. So we're done, right? Thumbs up?
Oh, hold on. Yeah, we're done.
That's going to wrap it up for today's show. If you enjoyed this episode and would like to help us continue to produce new episodes each week, visit jjmeetsworld.com, where you can donate to our Patreon, pick up some swag at the merch shop, or follow our link to Apple Podcasts and leave us a 5-star review. You can also follow us on social media. We're on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, all the sites the cool kids are using these days. JJ Meets World is produced every week by Tucker Lucas. You can find out more about Tucker's work by visiting moonbasemaria.com. If you want to get in touch with your host with the most, check out linebenders.com, where you can find direct contact info for JJ or booking information. McCafe. It's coffee for people who don't care about themselves anymore.